Hello everyone and welcome back to another how-to video from Freedom Marine. My name is Digvir and we're joined once again by Alex today from Revolution Yacht Experience. Today we're going to learn how to operate the freshwater system on board your Axopar. We've got an Axopar 37 today, and join us as Alex leads you through the process.
Hi everyone, so welcome aboard. Today we're doing our demo on a 37XC Axopar 2022, and as always we're going to get started with looking at the power situation. Down below here is where the switches are located on this model. There's 4 sliding switches to choose from. One of them will be the service battery. For the water system to work properly, the service battery is the only one that needs to be on, so I'm going to switch that on. Next, we're going to look at the pump location, and we're going to look at where the switch is to turn it on. And then we'll go around the vessel and we'll talk about all the items on the boat that are related to or connected to the freshwater system. So come with me and we'll take a walk through the boat and I'll show you everything there is to know. Okay, so we're in the head compartment, which is where the switch is located to turn the pump on and off. On this 37XC, there is a panel that you need to pop out with these 2 little buttons here. I pull this and I open it up. And you'll see on the bottom row, there will be, over on the left, there's one labeled freshwater pump. It's a pop-out switch. So if you can see a white collar on it, that means it's in the off position. It's popped out. To turn it on, you just press it in and it will hold. Sometimes you may hear the pump kick in for a little bit, sometimes not. That all depends on where the water pressure is at the time. If it turns on and continually runs, one of 2 things is true. You either have a tap open somewhere on the boat, or there's some sort of an airlock in the system, which we can talk about later, but that's what you can expect to see and hear when you turn that switch on. Okay, so we're now in the forward cabin, and when you hear the pump running, this is where that sound is going to be coming from. The reason for that is because the pump is actually located just down here on the port side under this bed. We'll pull it apart in a minute, but before we do, I just want to talk about all the components on board that make up the freshwater system and how it works on a boat. What I'm saying here is true for most boats, certainly all the other Axopars, but most vessels work this same way. It's essentially a closed pressurized system, and there is a pump on the boat there that draws water from a freshwater tank, and we'll show you how to fill that later. The pump will pull the water from the freshwater tank, and it will then pressurize the rest of the system to, somewhere between 30 and 40 psi usually. I'd have to check the spec on the pump, so take that exact number with a grain of salt, but it's somewhere in that vicinity. And when that water pressure has reached its threshold where it's meant to be, a little switch on the pump will see that pressure and the pump will shut off. So with a switch on and the pump not running, you know that the pump is seeing the water pressure in that system is at where it needs to be. Anytime a faucet is opened on the system, you're letting water out of the system. Therefore, that closed loop of water inside your boat has a drop in pressure. The pressure switch in the pump will recognize that drop in pressure, and the pump will kick back on to try and raise that water pressure back up to where it's meant to be. So when you close that faucet or whatever water system device that you're using, that stoppage of that faucet being open will close that loop again. The water pressure will rise, and then the pump will see that and then shut right off as soon as it reaches that threshold of whatever the set point of the pump is. So in a nutshell, that's essentially how the freshwater system does work on this boat and many other boats. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this berth here, and we're going to go into the hull area, into the bilge there, and I'm going to show you where the water pump is, what it looks like, and what you need to know about it. Okay, so we've removed both of the cushions here in this sleeping area, and also this big plywood panel here to expose everything that's under here. Most of the water system components are in this location, but not all of them. If you have a hot water tank, that's going to be located up forward, and we'll take a walk up there and just have a look at the components involved in that. And then, of course, there's other faucets around the vessel, but most of the business end of what's happening in your freshwater system is going to be located in this area. So as discussed before, we have the pump in here on the port side, down low. This is what kicks in when you open a tap. As you can see, there is this electronic device attached in line on the output side of the pump. This here is that pressure sensor that we were talking about earlier, that's detecting the water system pressure. So as you can see, it operates on the house voltage of 12 volts. And it is responsible for basically turning the pump on and off based on the pressure that's in the system at the time. You'll see on the input side of the pump, there's actually a filtration system. This really is just a simple mesh screen. If you find yourself in the situation where the water pressure seems really low for some reason, or water's not coming through the way you usually expect it, this filter right here is definitely something that you want to have a look at. You can very easily take it apart by moving these here. I won't do it now because it's all pressurized, but you want to turn your water system off, and then you can open this up and you can pull this screen out and give it a little bit of a clean. It definitely helps to just pull it out and give it a bit of a clean anyway, periodically, as part of the maintenance that you do on a regular basis. But that's what that little screen is for. It's a filtration system. If there happens to be anything in the lines or in the tank, this screen will catch it. Its job is basically to protect the internals of the pump from getting damaged should there be any foreign debris inside of the line. You don't want that to get into your pump and have your pump damaged for any reason. So something else on the pump I want to talk about as well is this little screw right here. So we do get some calls in sometimes. People would tell us that their pump is running essentially, but no water is coming out of any of the faucets. So if you come down here and you see that your screen is clear, but no water's coming out anywhere, what may have happened is that the pump may have ran dry, and when it runs dry, it'll lose prime. So that basically means if this whole area here isn't full of water, then it's really hard for it to make the pressure in the system again. Losing prime can be fixed by simply turning the pump off, and then you want to open this screw. You don't need to take it all the way out, but you can take it somewhat out. And then that way it gives the pump a really easy ejection point for some of the water. So it'll pull a solid stream of water into the pump body, and then it'll actually eject it out of here. This is a bleed screw, and it's specifically for priming the pump. And then once it's primed, you stick it back in, and then you can hopefully run the water system just as normal. You probably want to open any faucet. Maybe the one in the head would be a good place to start because it's nice and close. And hopefully, you can go around one by one, and you can open every faucet again, and you can fix that loss of prime issue that does arise. It is very common, and the most common when you run your water system completely dry, because you've been sucking air into the intake side, and then you've introduced air into the pump body. It doesn't like to be full of air; it likes to be full of water. So so that's how that works. Something else to look at down here is these lines and all these manifolds. Everything we see here is part of the water system. So this here is the hot water manifold. I can tell it's hot water pretty easily just by seeing that it's got a high temperature heater hose that feeds into it. So if the water is pretty warm, which it is, if the hot water tank is on, then this hose here is equipped to take all of that extra heat. It's rated for it. By the time it gets into this body here, it's lost a lot of the heat that's basically could cause any problem as far as it melting. So even though you will have hot water still, it won't be so hot by the time it gets to this manifold that it would cause any melting or any issues with any of the lines. These lines are just fine by the time it gets here. So the manifold will run to various locations around the boat that have hot water, and that's how that one there works. So on the output side of the pump, you'll see that it runs to the cold water manifold, and this cold water manifold has many lines coming out of it, and again that goes to various locations all around the vessel. They are not labeled right now, nor would you expect to see them labeled. So I can't tell you what each one does individually and specifically right now in this video, but know that most of the components around the vessel will have an individual line that runs back to this location here. So something else that's connected up is this guy right here. This is a water solenoid, and this one here will run to the toilet. So when you flush your toilet, the solenoid will open, and it'll run back there and give you the flushing in your toilet. So this is also electrically controlled. This is obviously the tank right in front of us here, in case you're wondering what this big thing was. Up top, the fill port is here. So the water will run down from the deck fill, and it'll fill the tank through this tube right here. As with any tank, they also need a vent. As you put contents, fluids into any tank, the air that's on top of that will shrink, and it needs to go somewhere, and that's what this vent here is for. So this really is just to carry air from the top of the tank in a filling situation and take it outside. I guess conversely, the opposite's also true. When you empty your tank as well, you will need some way for air to get in and replace the volume that the water's taken up. So it doesn't start essentially imploding on itself as well, and you create a vacuum inside. If you do see that you have a situation where the pump maybe starting to labor, or there's a problem with it. We've seen before that a tank vent line like this one could be plugged, and the pump can only draw so much against a vacuum. So a cleaning out of the tank vent is something that you can do if you're in that situation as well. So as far as what's down here, I think we've pretty much hit most of it as far as the freshwater system is concerned. But there is one more freshwater component, if we can call it that, in here that is a standalone system, and that's right down here in this corner. What we have is the windshield wash, and you'll see it's pretty easily identified by this internationally recognized windshield washer symbol. Right now it's also winterized. It does have a green solution in it as opposed to a pink one. That's simply because it was a different brand and it was existing and always in there. Like the other solenoids on the boat, this has a little solenoid here, electrically controlled. So if you're wondering how the water gets to your windshield washers, it's the signal, the electrical signal that you give to the switch will come down here and open this up, and then it'll push the pressure out and then into the windshield washers themselves. So that'll do for down here, I think, and then we'll head back outside and we'll show you some more equipment in the freshwater system. Okay, so up here on the bow, there's a couple of things to talk about. First one is the water fill itself. So on this model of Axopar, and different models, it's in different places, but on the 37XE 2022, up here on the starboard side of the locker, you'll see this labeled water. Simply pull, twist, open that one up, and then just fill the water. You know it's full because it will overflow. But it really doesn't do any harm if you overflow your water tank, so don't worry about that. Some tanks are a problem to overflow, like your holding tank, never overflow that one. That's definitely one you don't want to overflow, but just fill your water up until it flows out and then you're good to go. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is going to be inside this locker. There's a few fenders in here right now, so I'm just going to take a moment to clear those out off camera, and then we'll jump in there and we'll have a look at the next device. Okay, so I'm in the bow locker now. I've emptied out all those fenders, so you're going to need to do that if you want to access what I'm about to talk about. But the first one is on the port side inside here. We're going to see a row of breakers. If you want to learn a little bit more about this, then watch the video about how to connect your shore power, because we talk a little bit about it there. But the last one, all the way on the outboard side, I suppose, is for the hot water heater itself. So this one here, you should usually leave it in the off position unless you're going to use hot water for whatever reason. But if you do need to turn your hot water tank on and off, then this is where it's done. It's actually, you got to come all the way up here and switch this to the on position in order to get your hot water. The hot water runs on shore power, so you do need to be plugged in and have shore power in order to get your hot water going. But there's no reason why you couldn't get it going, before you left on a trip or something like that. And you could take a little bit of hot water with you, and hopefully it stays warm enough to to use a little bit later on. Next thing down here that I want to talk about is the hot water tank itself. So just over here on the starboard side, there is an access port. And if you were to remove that and look inside, you'll see that the hot water tank is actually located essentially right under the deck, like right in this area. So if you pop this off, you'll see that there'll be, the immersion heating element is actually there. And, there's not a lot to do as an end user, honestly. It's more of a service port for service personnel, or if you're a do-it-yourselfer, of course, you can access it from right here. So from here on out, we're going to walk around the vessel and we're going to look at all the system components that are faucets or toilets or anything else that runs on the system. So I'm starting here in the head, back again where we turned it on. Just remember the switch to turn it on and off is just sitting right here to my left. There is a faucet right here in the sink. So there's a hot and there's a cold. So we looked at the manifolds earlier, and looking at those, we now know that it hits the manifold and one will come out of the hot manifold and one will come out of the cold manifold. This boat has got hot and cold water on board. Not every vessel will have a hot water heater, so if it doesn't, it won't have hot water. If it does, then it will, obviously. The toilet also uses fresh water. There is a couple of switches down here, and one of them will flush the toilet and insert water into the toilet. The other one is water only. And then this one here is flush only. So in most situations, you're just going to use this top button because it puts water into the rim, and it also flushes the toilet by running the motor to take the contents of the bowl away, and that'll go into the holding tank, which is really part of the black water system, but we'll mention it a couple of times throughout this video. So normal operations, you just hit that button. I won't open the toilet up. I think we've all seen a toilet work before, but that's essentially part of the freshwater system, and important that you know that it is. Behind the toilet is where the water comes in, just back here. We did talk about the solenoid up forward earlier, and it had a very different looking hose on it. That same hose is what you'll see back here behind the toilet, and that's a pretty good indication that those two are connected. So pressing this button opens that solenoid, runs it to the back of the toilet, flushes your toilet. That's about all for in here, apart from maybe the sump. Yes, there's a sump beneath my feet. If we run something like this, you hear that pump running in the background, and this water here will actually go down into a lower location. There's something under my feet here, and it basically collects the water, and when it reaches a certain level, it'll send it out again. So on models that have showers equipped, which is most of them, when you have a shower, the water will drain down also into the same sump area that this fresh water is going to, and once that sump fills up, it'll pump the contents overboard. Okay, so that is it now for this room. We'll move on to the next location. Okay, next location is here in the main cabin. Driving helm's right there. On the models that have it equipped, we open this up, and then we see a sink is revealed. Sometimes there's a cooker in here as well, depends on the configuration. But here we have, just like in the other locations, we have the faucet, we have a cold, and we have a hot. So I don't really need to demonstrate, I guess, how to turn on a tap, but once again, these are connected to the hot and cold water system, and that's one location that has it. We'll move to the next. Okay, so final destination in our tour is here in the cockpit. There's a couple of things out here, depending on the model that you have. This particular vessel is a bench and not a wet bar. If you have the wet bar model, you will see some sinks, or a sink with a faucet back here. If you have hot water enabled or hot water installed in your boat, then you'll have the hot tap. But if you have not got a hot water heater on your boat, then you will just see the cold tap. Obviously with a cabin version, or an aft cabin, should I say, you won't have any sinks or anything back here. It's really just for the wet bar. So all that aside, in this locker here is where you'll find your transom shower or washdown shower. If you pull this here, you'll see that it has this head. It's got a mixing valve on here, so the more you twist it, it'll go from giving you just straight up cold water, and then the more you twist it, it'll get more and more hot, so it's mixing it as it goes, and that's how this one works. So it's actually pretty simple. Just twist the head, and then it comes out these holes, and then twist it shut, and then put it away. Okay, so that concludes our tour of the freshwater system. I hope this was helpful information, and if you're requiring any more information or you have any other questions, just pop it down in the comments below, or reach out to Freedom Marine International Yacht Sales.